Thanks for listening to Curious Cat, a podcast that examines a shadowy space where science and the supernatural collide. I'm your host, Jennifer Hodes. Join me every week as I explore what it means to be a soul in a meat suit. Welcome to Curious Cat. I feel like, have you ever had that moment where you see a friend you haven't seen in forever and you have so much to talk about and like 2 hours just flies by? Well, that's how I feel right now with you. I'm just off the heels of a phenomenal trip to Japan. It was precious time, 2 weeks with the whole family, so rare. And although I did not pack my podcaster hat, I could not help but immerse myself in the country, the culture, and sought off the beaten trail places where ancient history was kept alive right next to mega modern skyscrapers. I had to share some of my favorite stories and moments with you, and I'm doing a deep dive into the clay figurines I saw firsthand at the Tokyo National Museum that are fixtures on History Channel's Ancient Aliens, dedicating an entire episode to dogus and the connection I feel they have with an ancient creature from Japan. I hate to be a tease, but let's get into it. Stories from Japan 2024. I have to begin with general comments about the gift of travel. We travel for a myriad of reasons: to reconnect with people, to stretch out of our comfort zones, to shift or expand our perspectives, and at least temporarily to suspend the bellybutton-close vision we have of reality. Yes, zooming out on that myopic point of view just for a short amount of time. My recent trip did just that. 6,000 miles by plane. Japan is a country that spent most of its history isolated from the Western world. Tokyo is a city that is as large as New York City and London combined, which is really hard to wrap my brain around. Japanese culture is calcitrant in its manners, its formalities, customs, and timeliness. Yes, even in the midst of modern times where everyone is plugged into social media, their culture remains intact. Though I did catch a couple moments, slips of some pushing for this steadfast culture to change. They were subtle glimpses from the youth. They were teeny tiny acts of rebellion, anarchy in a sense, but in order to spot them, my vision had to become microscopic. And part of my vision came from being confronted by an officer of the law at a baseball game myself, but more on that later. Japan is a country of contrasts, a land of ancient spirits where the supernatural coexists beside the ultra-modern. The pace of life can slow to a mindful meditation beneath the gates of a centuries-old shrine, and then quicken to hyperspeed as you recline your seat on a bullet train. Japan cherishes the old as much as the new, if not more. When I say the supernatural coexists with the ultra-modern, I captured that in a photo. I took it from our hotel window just hours before boarding the plane back to the States. I wanted to capture the reflection of high shrine on the glass facade of a skyscraper, and I did that. This is Tokyo. I went on 4 separate train lines to reach the outer limits of the city, and within steps of the modest train station, I was immersed in the most moving, unusual, spooky ravine I've ever encountered. As I stood on that bridge above the dark cut of water, I was shaded by a massive stand of bamboo and maple trees that were older than the United States itself. I watched the water from above, scared of the height but drawn to the movement of what looked like from 75 feet up to be the slithering of a great black dragon in its depths. It slithered along in the gentle current. temples, shrines, memorials, execution sites, graves, all of them and more are preserved to mark history. The fallen warriors, the priests, the prayers, the places where Japan used to be ruled, knots of trees and hydrangea-covered stones, marked, savored, preserved, just steps away from skyscrapers and train tracks. Yes, Tokyo is a city of contrasts. It's a fragile ecosystem. To keep itself working in smooth rhythm, millions of citizens have to abide by the social norms and constraints, while also, sometimes artfully, avoiding conflict. Conflict is to be avoided at all costs, and often the price paid is to look the other way as an injustice happens so as not to stir the pot. I saw this twice on the trip, and it made my inner American bristle. But Japan, with a perspective that spans millennia, not minutes, well, there's a sense that justice will be served, just not in our human time. I hope the stories I collected help you fall in love with Japan too. I'm not talking about that rose-colored first love kind, but a deeper affection, like tracing the scar on a decades-held lover, coaxing the story out of them again about how that mark came to be. On with the stories. Japan, I've described to others since my first visit there almost a decade ago, takes something damn good and makes it the best. And yes, that's my Nacho Libre Jack Black impression you just heard. He sometimes jumps out of my mouth when I get excited. But here are a few of our favorite things that Japan has taken to the next level. 7-Eleven, McDonald's, French bakeries, including crepes, trains, of course, taxis, theme parks, Tokyo Sea, and diet staples like flour and milk. Why can't we have nice things? Why? That was what we were left thinking after every impromptu visit to the 7-Eleven in the basement of our hotel. Okay, I know, you're thinking of midnight snack runs, Slurpee machines, questionable prepackaged food in the refrigerated area that you will take a gamble on when you are hungry enough. That's America's 7-Eleven. Here's what you will find in Tokyo Mini Martscape. Oh, and besides 7-Eleven, which they sometimes curiously have identified as 7i Holdings, there are also Lawson's and Family Mart, which I'm told by reliable sources are equally fantastic. So I spent a fair amount of yen at 7-Eleven, so I'm very qualified to share the experience with you. It's a tiny slip of a store. From the automatic doors, you can take in visually the store entirely. It is well lit, not overly so, but lighting that makes inspecting products easy. There are conveniences tucked into the corners like an ATM, a copy fax machine, a phone charging station for rent, and a row of carefully curated beauty and health products. From teeny tiny nail polish in a modest spectrum that managed to be flattering for every skin type, the colors are modern without being garish. Face masks, deodorant spray for smelly Air Force One shoes, cooling sprays, perfumes in darling bottles that smell like they were crafted in casks by olfactory witches. There's a rack of magazines and puzzle books. There's a smattering of tiny toys for the child in your life. But then there's also the food. Refrigerated shelves hold sandwiches, bowls, wraps, desserts, and more. But the sandwiches were the star of our family. Perfect white bread, crusts removed, embrace either a perfect proportion of spread like egg salad or tuna, or hold a crisp leaf of lettuce and a slice of savory ham. They are packaged in threes, and my favorite was the variety pack. 1 tuna, 1 egg, and 1 ham. All of them neat, yummy, cold, fresh, and delicious. They made for an ideal lunch and cost all of what, $2? There were even lovely fruit sandwiches, peach slices on cream cheese that melted in your mouth. The candy variety was all exceptional. The assortment had been curated by someone who knows snacks. None had artificial this or that, which is all we have in the US on our candy shelves. Some of the Japanese sweets had probiotics to aid gut health, and behind the sweets, an open freezer full of goodies. My favorite was the vanilla ice cream wrapped in buttery, soft vanilla mochi. The beverages, too, were a sight. A modest but, again, artfully curated variety of caffeinated and not caffeinated drinks. When that hand basket was full and it was time to pay, there was a simple, fast-moving line. The cashier would bag those treasures as you used the coolest cash machine ever to pay. You pushed a button for a cash or card transaction, and then wow. This machine undid years of childhood anxiety I'd held about paying in coins with dollar bill wielding adults breathing down my neck. These machines, you dumped in your coins and they were totaled instantly. If you needed to use paper yen, there was a slot for that. Then it returned your change in the same efficient manner. Oh, I miss those machines. The prices, well, it hurts me to share that I had a lunch of a 3-pack of sandwiches, an iced coffee, a half container of Pringles, and a mochi ice cream dessert that totaled about $5. That was 7-Eleven. I dream about that store. Before we left for home, I went to Big Camera and found in their toy section a tiny model of a Japanese 7-Eleven and purchased the only one they had for Nora's Josh, whose birthday is around the corner. Other things Japan took and made better. McDonald's. If you've traveled abroad, then you know, even if you hate Mickey D's, that there's a moment on a long trip when you crave something familiar in your belly and you find yourself in line, cheeks tinged with shame, waiting for a cheeseburger. American boy need cheeseburger. We had a hunch Japan would do even McDonald's better. So thirsty and curious, we stopped in. 2 peach smoothies and 3 kid-sized cheeseburgers later, we'd confirmed the hunch. Even this staple of America, it was done to the nth level in Japan. Real fruit, fluffy buns, the beef. We had to wonder if this was some subcategory of Wagyu or Kobe. There are French cafes throughout Japan, from bustling Shimbashi and Tokyo stations to the street level. They are regular fixtures of the landscape, and yep, you guessed it, they're better done than the ones I visited in Paris. Their pastries, the coffees, the petit fours, my God. We were all left wondering why we can't have nice things, which led to sad discussions about lobbyists and big government and selling out to the man. Called Sensoji, there is an ancient temple that lies in the heart of Asakusa, where Buddhism and Shintoism have coexisted peacefully for centuries. From JapanGuide.com, quote, the legend says that in the year 628, 2 brothers fished a statue of Kannon, the goddess of mercy, out of the Sumida River, and even though they put the statue back into the river, it always returned to them. Consequently, Sensoji was built nearby for the goddess of Kannon. The temple was completed in 645, making it Tokyo's oldest temple. Because it was our first adventure, we'd yet to buy train passes. At local Big Camera, our second favorite shop in Japan, shadowed only by 7-Elevens, we showed our passports and forked over yen, receiving 3-day train passes, then went to the basement where we caught a train to Asakusa. Muggy and warm, though not as humid as our last trip to Japan, we managed the train system just fine. The Joshes, my daughters are both partnered with great humans named Josh, were especially keen to note the Japanese ways on the train, the unspoken etiquette of not speaking on the phone, keeping your belly facing out the windows if you're standing, and things like that. We all read the advertisements posted on every flat surface, and soon we emerged at the platform for Asakusa. We followed the flow of people to the street level and onto the temple gates. As we pressed toward Sensoji, I had this it felt so strange, urge to keep track of all 6 of us on the crowded walk to the temple gate. Strange because my kids are full-on adults, have been for years. I acknowledged my anxiety and it shrunk like a wool sweater in the dryer. We all branched off in different directions, agreeing to meet in an hour or so. I followed people to the massive incense burner, breathing in the cleansing smoke, exhaling stress residue, and then went with some of our party to a large set of wooden drawers. After paying a small coin, I shook a container. Then out came a stick with a Japanese number. That number, it corresponded to a drawer. I opened the drawer and pulled out a fortune. It was awful. It was so bad. It was something like, you are hiking up a mountain and will continue to hike for days and days and never reach the peak. You're on a boat at sea and fall overboard, treading water until you finally drown, which is mercy. You get the gist. It was terrible. That's when I saw that 3 out of 4 of us received bad fortunes. Josh's was phenomenal. I mean, it was so great. It was like megastar, massive money, but still pure joy and balance. The rest of us held our fortunes like rotting fish at a distance. And then we spotted these wooden racks. We learned we could take our bad fortunes, tie them into a bow, and put them on the wood rack to be rid of that bad fortune. It's sour luck just blown away in the incense-tinged smoke. Okay, but isn't it a racket that 3 out of 4 of us had really bad fortunes, and there were a lot of bad fortunes tied to those wooden racks, so it felt like a little bit of a scheme. We enjoyed the rest of the day, following the river to Tokyo Skytree. What a wonderful outing. We'd walked maybe 15,000 steps and taken in a mix of old and new. If you make it to Japan, I have no doubt you too will fall in love with the people, the gardens, the spiffy swift trains, the food, and the pockets of history and lore tucked in every corner of every prefecture. One place I wish to spend more time, if I get the chance to return, is Ueno Park. It is steps from the train station and holds museums, acres of lush gardens, temples, art galleries, and a zoo. Think New York City's Central Park, though Tokyo, again, is the size of NYC and London combined. We went to Ueno Park to visit the Tokyo National Museum and stumbled on a weekend market filled with food and artisans. We took a cursory glance, swearing to linger longer after the museum and lunch. Tokyo National Museum is filled with national treasured artifacts. The first hall I entered held Buddha sculptures, some of which were rare depictions of Buddha, seated on a cloud, carved out of wood, gold dusted. The entire hall held so much energy, I ended up having a 20-minute long hot flash. I captured a curious flash of green in a picture I took too. Past that area, we found other really cool displays. My favorite I posted on TikTok. It was an area that revealed the process behind making lacquered boxes, which is laborious and requires a dust-free zone to achieve the mirror-like polish of black. But that wasn't the coolest thing. No, it wasn't. There was a giant television that played a video on a loop. Scientists had taken time to x-ray ancient artifacts, objects here and there that were in this museum and others, and the results were on the screen. The inner secrets of those objects, never meant for human eyes, revealed in 3D. The one that made the hairs on my arms stand up was the Wishing Buddha. Crafted 1,300 years or more ago, it was a sculpture created to grant wishes. What the X-ray revealed was the intention with which the sculpture was created. Every inch was made to conspire with the Buddha and the universe to grant those wishes. As the sculpture spun around, layers were revealed. Where the head was stood a little door. On the front side of the door floated 5 teeny tiny Buddhas, and in the center of them sat a vessel, which looked like a tiny clay or stone cup. On the back side of that head was the back of the door, but beneath that was a strange clump. Were they fat twigs? I wondered at first. The video closed in and revealed it was a family of dolls. All this never meant for human eyes. And imagine the things that didn't leave physical traces, like the chanting and the prayers as that wishing Buddha was born. It was just phenomenal. It's made me wonder what lies inside other ancient objects. Next, we entered a building of archaeological finds. Many came from the Kofun period, from the 3rd to the 6th century, and were buried beneath family dwellings or in burial tombs. The energy was reverent. It was whispering, hollowed, still, as objects made for the dead sat exposed for the living. The light in the space was soft, but was never meant to touch these again. I was keenly aware and took a few photos, but not a lot. They were allowed, but it felt wrong, like taking the last bit of candy from a glass dish. This area held the dogu. They are unusual sculptures in a variety of forms. Many, well, most actually, were broken in half intentionally and buried beneath the floors of family dwellings. And then I saw the figure I'd seen countless times as I watched Ancient Aliens. It was a goggle-eyed figure, one leg broken clean off that was supported by a block of stone. It did look alien, like a person in a spacesuit. I could definitely see that. Then I looked at the backside, the side they never show in all those episodes. I took photos and my Ghost app came on, with the words lighting up my phone screen. Dust, within, low. That was it. These figures are strange, and I found 2 more examples of the goggle-eyed ones that I'd never seen before and shot photos. Many have speculated on the dogu, saying they are fertility symbols, akin to the Venus of Willendorf, or they're ritualistic in some way. I promise I'll devote all of next week to these figurines. I'm going to share with you my journey with the research and how saving a creature on an afternoon walk in Denver provided a revelation. There are many more treasures within the walls of the Tokyo National Museum. We had a family friend that was in Japan at the same time as us, and we planned for a day together in Kamakura, which lies to the south of Tokyo along the coast. We met at Shimbashi Station and took the 30-minute train to Kita-Kamakura because I'd read that it was the best way to start. And then you walk your way through the ancient capital as a sort of meditation on the way to the famous great Buddha statue. From Potter's Travel Essential Japan, quote, 25 miles southwest of Tokyo, as a religious center, Kamakura presents an extraordinary legacy. Most of its temples and shrines are in settings of remarkable beauty. Many are designated national treasures. And it goes on. For the aristocrats of the Heian era Japan from 794 to 1185, life was defined by the imperial court in Kyoto. Who in their right mind would venture elsewhere? In Kyoto, there was grace and beauty and poignant affairs of the heart. Everything beyond was howling wilderness. By the 12th century, 2 clans, the Taira and the Minamoto, both offshoots of an imperial line, had come to dominate the affairs of the court and were at each other's throats in a struggle for supremacy. The rivalry between the 2 clans became an all-out war, and by 1185, the Minamoto were masters of all of Japan. Yoritomo no Minamoto forced the imperial court to name him shogun. He was now de facto and de jure the military head of the state. The emperor was left as a figurehead in Kyoto, and the little fishing village of Kamakura, a superb natural fortress surrounded on 3 sides by hills and guarded on the 4th by the sea, became and for 141 years remained the seat of Japan's first shogunal government. So after 1333, when the center of power returned to Kyoto, Kamakura reverted back to being a sleepy backwater town on the edge of the sea, end quote. So to me, Kamakura is a place of peace, of lush gardens, cave tombs, spirituality, and wonder. We had quite the day in Kamakura. I'm not sure our friend Michael knew the walking he was in for, but he was all in to explore. Steps away from the train station was the very first Zen Buddhist temple and school in the whole of Japan. Inako-ju Temple is the largest of the Zen monasteries in Kamakura. Founded in 1282, it belonged to the Rinzai sect of Zen Buddhism. It still does. The samurai were especially admiring of this sect, with its emphasis on the ascetic life as a path to self-transcendence. This was a place that many escaped to, having been driven out of China. Still, a functioning monastic center, it is said to enshrine a tooth of the Gautama Buddha himself. I found a tiny cave opening on a quiet, overgrown hill in the temple grounds, and there was a marker that told the story of white deer. Upon the completion of the temple, it said a herd of tiny white deer emerged from this cave opening. They knelt and listened to the first speech given in the completed space. Were these the ghosts of those who had died resisting the Mongol invasions in 1274 and 1281? Possibly. What we do know is that 742 years later, the location is still marked. That history is preserved. We continued on the path into Kamakura in search of lunch, and Michael pointed across the street to a tiny place that felt sewn into the fabric of Kamakura. We had such a great meal, and I feel like we made friends with the owners, and we ventured through the town, up and over massive hills, into a plaza near a train station that just teemed with teenagers in school uniforms. They were eating ice cream and visiting. It was delightful. The great Buddha statue, Daibutsu, was another short train ride away, and we made it through the entrance gates just a few minutes shy of closing. The massive 120-ton statue was intended for another site, but then the ship carrying him up the coast lost its precious cargo over the side in what some said was a storm. Buddha washed up on the shore of Kamakura, and the city leaders felt his wishes were made clear. They got busy building a temple around him, and that roof and structure that they built as well burned down. It was clear the great Buddha wished to meditate beneath the wide open sky in perpetuity, and so it was. Next was Nara. From my journal, up early, finished packing for Nara trip, then down to breakfast. At 9 a.m., we mustered in the lobby, met the taxi to Tokyo Station, and as we got out of the cab, another cab almost hit Doug. After sorting ourselves, we found our train's gate and bought food for the bullet train, the Shinkansen. I'm excited for Nara. 2 taxis to JW Marriott in Nara. The property was tidy, brand spanking new, and the staff was kind and enthusiastic. After tidying up in the room, we were ready for a walkabout. It was suggested that we turn left out of the hotel and follow the road for 10 minutes. Soon we stood at the foot of the Suzuka Gate, crossing into the ruins of the imperial capital where it once stood in Nara. I felt the importance of this site, surrounded by breeze-blown grasses and etched in by stone irrigation canals. The stone bases of the support columns still exist, and one area is tinted with the likeness of a large building printed to size. Inside the building lies the excavation site where they are unearthing pieces of the past even now. The train signaled, then rolled past, and time slows in this expansive World Heritage Site where old meets new. As we continued to walk the grounds, we admired the surrounding mountains. The trees were filled with talkative birds. I felt a calm just echo through my bones. We were grateful to be in Nara, to be staying overnight so we could take in this city without the bustle of tourists that we would be among tomorrow. The animals on the Capitol grounds were going about their business, unbothered by the six of us. Doug spotted a raccoon in an irrigation canal. The fuzzy creature considered us. We considered him, but then his lip raised in a little snarl. It was clear that we were too close to his home. We moved away and continued to watch him. He rose to standing and watched us. Joining the other world again, we walked through a grocery store, finding at one end the most wonderful pet adoption center I've ever seen. They were playing music from the puppy bowl, and inside huge spaces were puppies playing. They each had little beds and play equipment as well as water. It was just lovely. There was one gorgeous cat too that reminded me of Romeo, but brown. She slept with a smile on her face, and it made me miss Romeo. Thursday, May 23rd, Nara. Slept well, and after breakfast, we shuttled to the Nara Deer Park. We fed many deer, many rice crackers. I don't think I've given you enough background on Nara, so from Fodder's Travel Essential Japan, quote, Nara is a place of synthesis where Chinese art, religion, and architecture fused with Japanese language and Shinto traditions. The city was established in AD 710 and was then known as Heijo Kaiyo, City of Peace. Fujiwara no Fuhito, father-in-law of Emperor Momu, was responsible for the city's creation. His grandson, the future emperor, later graced the new capital with its wealth of temples, pagodas, and shrines. Buddhism had come to Japan in the 6th century, along with kanji, which are the Chinese characters, and tea. It spread throughout the archipelago. Emperor Shomu hoped that making the new capital the center of Buddhism would unite the country and secure his position as head of an emergent nation state. The grandest of the Buddha temples built in Nara during this era was Todaiji, which Emperor Shomu intended as a nexus for all the temples of his realm. But after 84 years, the Citadel of Peace fell victim to the very intrigue that the emperor had tried to suppress. In AD 794, the capital moved to Kyoto, and Nara lost prominence, as did Kigon sect that still manages Todaiji today. Now Nara is a provincial city whose most obvious role is a historical one, not political, and Todaiji is a monument rather than a political stronghold. Nara is a site of renewal and reinvention that has overcome typhoons, fires, and wars to remain a city of superlatives. Its position in the national consciousness as the birthplace of modern Japanese culture is well secured. Back to our journey. There were deer that bowed politely and took our rice crackers gently, while others nipped at our butts and shirts. Prince Josh made a point of feeding the skinny deer and the babies. We walked further up the hill and into a shaded forest. The path was lined with deer. A raven watched us, seeming to follow along on our journey. He was noble and beautiful. Then something weird happened that could have gone very badly very fast. As Bryn and Josh walked ahead of me, unbeknownst to them, a bedraggled woman and man, white but badly sunburned from sleeping outside, they seemed almost American, followed them. The bedraggled couple looked as though they were hard on their luck, in need of a lucky break. Without a word, the man signaled to the woman to get behind Bryn and yank her coin purse from her small backpack. At first, the woman shook her head no, looking at Josh, who's 6'4". Then the man pushed further. When something seemed imminent, I stepped between them and my kids, and I said no. Without words, I just mouthed it. I told them to leave them alone. They were surprised, mostly because my superpower is being invisible, so they'd not noticed me. They took off running in the other direction. Next, we went to a botanical garden set within a magical primordial forest. Bryn and I borrowed fans from the ticket office, and all of us meandered the paths through the flowers, the budding foliage, ponds with turtles and koi, then rounded the bend to find an island which was off limits for everyone. I read the sign and learned that a massive tree had been knocked over in a windstorm centuries ago. The tree survived and continued to grow in spite of the jarring event, and to many, including me, it looked like a wooden dragon. And I have to mention that this year, 2024, is the year of the dragon, specifically the wood dragon. That island came to be a sacred and revered place in Nara, an honored landmark. I mean, what a joy to behold. Because of the dragon's powers, visitors are not allowed on the island. After taking a water break at the base of the gardens, we went deeper into the protected primordial forest. We found a temple, the Temple of Five Dragons, which meandered through the trees. I remembered the stones that my friend Monique sent to me for the trip, and we offered some here and there along the path. I'd offered one to the noble raven earlier and had left others in Tokyo. The Temple of Five Dragons is known for bringing luck and prosperity to couples. The grounds were stunning, and we felt far removed from the touring crowds that had poured off the buses. What a blessing. Red temple gates, green trees, deep ravine, quiet solitude. We saw deer, great elders in the herd, lying in silent observation from lookouts in the forest. They watched us with curious eyes. It was magical. The experience made me wonder what happened to these precious and sacred deer as they aged, and then when they were ready to die, exit from earth for higher realms. The thought made me cry. Eventually, the path emptied into a neighborhood, and we were back to flesh and bone humans again. Nara was the midpoint of our trip. And when we returned to Tokyo, we had gained this confidence about navigating the city. The timing was perfect. Each of us could break off and explore different facets of the city in the day, sharing our experiences over dinner at night. One day, I found I had time to myself to explore. I knew what I wanted to do, but it was a very complicated 4-train field trip. Part of me wanted to go to, just do a safer thing. Take one train to Ginza and shop for gifts for friends back home. But then I reread a section of Secret Tokyo, and I found not one, but 3 destinations in the same area, and I knew I had to go. I took a screenshot of the directions and then boarded my first train. I needed to step outside my comfort zone. The final train took me to the outer limits of Tokyo, the southwest corner, where I hoped to track down burial mounds. One was a rare keyhole-shaped burial mound, which is only 1% of all known burial mounds. I was going to a potentially spooky place in the far reaches by myself. Not able to get an Uber or Lyft or even walk back to the hotel, I was all in. As I left the tiny train station, I checked Google Maps, which glitched. I took a right and then Google glitched again. I walked a straight street past small shops. The owners were sweeping their front entrances and they bowed and waved as I did. And they did the same as I reversed course and passed again. They were too polite to say anything. And then they did the same as I went past 2 more times. I was embarrassed, but they just acted like it was the first time they saw me. Finally, I understood the grid of the town a bit more, and I ventured to the very first mound site. 212 Kaminogi is the address. I reread the guidebook as I walked through what I was learning was an affluent neighborhood. It seemed like every single driveway had a Tesla in it. The guidebook entry read, "It is a strange little round green hill behind a barrier that may well interest curious visitors. Far from being a natural hill, it is the site of a keyhole tomb. Over 15 centuries old, Kaminoga Inarizuka tumulus yielded several artifacts when it was excavated in 1995 and 2009, including necklaces and statues, which dated the mound to the end of the 4th century. Google said turn right, which I did, and I followed a footpath that led between 4 houses. There were 2 on each side. Was I venturing into someone's backyard? Like, I felt really weird. I checked the directions again. Then a few steps ahead, there was this metal fence. I could see past it was a grassy hill. There was the tumulus. I backtracked and went around the block looking for a better, more obvious place to access the mound. And soon I found it. It was this narrowed path that was marked by a conchi-laden obelisk. It was a sure sign I was at the right locale. I took a photo of a little interpretive sign. It was very tiny and noted the red locked metal gate. I could see the mound only slightly better, but it was something to behold. A burial mound in the middle of an affluent neighborhood that had been preserved for over 16 centuries. I took out the pages I'd ripped from the guidebook and read about the next site. Quote, some 500 meters away in Tamagawa Nogemachi Park, between the baseball pitch and the tennis courts, this time resembling a circular pyramid, is the much more impressive Nogi Otsuka tumulus, which was probably the tomb of a high-ranking warlord of the mid-3rd century. Excavations in the late 19th century revealed thousands of objects. If you wish to see these objects, I've linked to them in the online exhibit below in the show notes. So rereading about that burial mound existing next to a baseball field is one thing, but seeing a stepped pyramid that is 16 centuries old beside an outfield fence, it is quite another thing altogether. It was breathtaking. I cannot read Japanese, so I assumed the sign said to keep out. I circled the pyramid, just taking it in, and I saw this rectangular stone formation that made this the rare keyhole mound that it was. And then I saw steps up. I followed them up to the top of a flattened pyramid. There I saw at my feet porcelain printed with a scale to drawing of what was found here. There were 4 burials total here, stone coffins made to look like bamboo, and it was agreed that this was the place of a great man. I read in a blog later, quote, someone very powerful, like a big chief, who ruled the wide area from southern Tokyo to Yokohama is sleeping inside. Who exactly? Nobody knows at this moment, end quote. I was overwhelmed with just like this grief, this emotion just bubbled up. No one was around and I just let myself cry. I just felt my feelings. And a raven swooped past me. He brushed my bracelet, then landed on a giant tree on the west side of the mound. I told him thank you for letting me come to this place, that I would always carry a piece of it with me. The tree he sat on looked familiar, but the trunk belied my logical brain. It was thicker than 10 feet across. I'd look at the photos I took later and find to my pure shock that it was a yew bush that had grown this wide and towered some 50 feet in the air, planted centuries ago. I returned to solid ground and I felt weary and sad. I sat on a bench in the shade and absorbed the emotions that had bubbled up for the dead buried ages ago at my feet. And then I looked at the map and found the last place I had intended to visit. It was a Buddhist temple where you forfeit your camera and phone, and then you go down into a cave and guide yourself through the pitch dark to the other side of the cave, using only the smooth walls in your hands to make it back to the light. It was another train stop past where I was, and my soul battery felt drained. I decided to walk to the train station, and then I would determine on the platform whether to go on or return to the hotel. It was a 15-minute walk. The heat and humidity were flushing my cheeks and frizzing my hair. Right outside the tiny station, I saw a shaded bridge. I gravitated there to get a little cool off and found myself standing on a bridge high above a ravine, a flow of black water 75 feet below. I felt a moment of vertigo, and then I swore I saw a dragon. It was lithe and quick, meandering through the middle of the waters. I rubbed my eyes and just had to know what this magical place was. My phone was almost dead, so instead I looked across the street, and there was this big interpretive sign, which was a Todoroki Valley area guide. This, I found out, was a government-designated place of scenic beauty. There was a walking path that paralleled this ravine, but the entrance had been closed due to recent rainfall. There was such power to this place. I felt equal pulls to ignore the signage and walk the trail, and also leave as fast as possible. I can't quite explain it. The tug and the pull and the revulsion and the fascination. I stood above the ravine again, taking in the massive bamboo and the building high Japanese maples. I took pictures that just don't do it justice. They just don't show the scale. But then I went to the train station and I rode the rails home. I found out later, when I dug deeper into the valley's history, that there is a tunnel tomb along the path, a temple, and a waterfall, and also that the nearby waters drain along the ravine, and they are drained through what they sculpted to look like dragon heads. I promise to return here, and I will do the blind cave meditation the same day. But once I was back in my hotel room, I just felt this sense of accomplishment. I had pushed past my comfort zone, I pushed past my anxiety, and I had a really great, really interesting experience that I won't soon forget. Our trip to Japan wasn't all temples and train rides, though. I got in trouble with the authorities. Yeah, I did. And in retrospect, it was the perfect way to spend our last night in the country. It speaks to the fragile nature of millions of people living in such close quarters, a societal structure that relies on compliance, consideration, and abiding by the rules in order to remain not only functioning, but peaceful and smooth. And to think I almost shattered the calm with my flashlight. One of the only days the Giants baseball team was playing a home game at Tokyo Dome happened to be our last night in Japan. Seeing baseball in Japan is a must-do. We'd done it the last time we were in town, so again, I booked tickets. After getting a bite to eat at a food wagon outside the stadium, we navigated our way to our gate, then our seats. We were in the nosebleeds, in the outfield, squarely behind center field. We'd only missed about a half an inning or so when we took our seats and the game was still 0-0. A couple that seemed to be on a first date sat in front of us. They were adorable. They were cheering to everything. The entire outfield section, in fact, the fans watching that baseball in that stadium, in that section specifically, it was like a cardio workout. Chants, complicated hand clapping, singing to people that were up to bat. They never stopped with their coordinated cheers. It put American baseball fans to shame. I haven't seen this level in the States with the exception of maybe a tight game in the playoffs or the World Series. It was super impressive. Between innings was also a spectacle. People dressed in elaborate sushi costumes and raced to a finish line. Home and away cheerleaders did fancy coordinated dances, drums beat. It was just a blur. There was a group of young teens that were a few rows ahead of us, and they had these hollow little baseball bats that they would tap, tap, tap to the rhythm of these clapping routines. And Bryn thought the bats were cute. I mean, so did I. Doug picked up on that and did what he does with people he loves. He left his seat in search of the bats. He returned with a flashlight that looked like a bat, not finding the other, and Bryn switched on the light and cheered along. Round 2 of looking paid off because Doug had found the little bats. Bryn took them and let me use the flashlight to cheer. Not 5 minutes later, an officer of the law bent over me saying something terse in Japanese. I was super confused. He pointed to the flashlight and I cheerfully offered that we bought it at the pro shop. And then he pointed and frowned, and the first date couple in front of me turned around. He wants you to turn it off. It's distracting the other team. I was so embarrassed. I pushed every button. I cycled through the myriad of colors, face breaking out in sweat. The cycle of colors never seemed to end. I tried pushing on the black base and nothing. Finally, the couple took the flashlight from me and pushed the buttons. They also cycled through the colors. Oh my God, the officer was just getting madder and madder. Then Nora said, try pushing both buttons at the same time, which I said louder still to the young man, and he did it. And the light went dark, and the entire section of fans that I was in breathed a sigh of relief. I'd brought shame to my section. It was palpable. I sat, head hanging like Eeyore, and sopped sweat from my face for at least another 15 miserable minutes. Then Bryn said, in a tone meant only for me, "What the hell? Who sells a souvenir that you aren't allowed to use?" I just shook my head and laughed. It was the perfect way to head back to the States. If you plan a visit to Japan, and you should, it is a phenomenal place. Pick up a Japanese etiquette book, would you? We did, and read it as a refresher course from our last trip. Here are just a few of the rules that come to mind. Don't hand someone money, ever. You set it down if they don't provide a tray. You set it down on the, cash register or on the desk. Don't eat or drink anything as you stand or walk. Definitely do not consume anything on a train, the exception being the bullet trains. Do not leave food on your plate because it looks like you're being gluttonous and you took too much and you take it for granted. Don't expect trash cans anywhere while you're out and about. Like hiking in the US, pack out what you pack in. Don't be loud on a train. Don't let your phone make noises. Do not take a call either. Don't stare. Don't say anything if someone is sitting in a disabled area, but they clearly aren't, and someone gets on the train that clearly is. Confrontation is rude. If you have tattoos, keep them covered. They have bad associations in Japan, even though they ironically invented tattooing and even have a museum about the art. And don't use your baseball pro shop purchase flashlight at the same game unless they turn off all the stadium lights or it's in between innings. To be in Japan is to overthink all the time when you are out in public. It can be exhausting. We tried our best to abide by the rules, but there were some that I've never read in a tour book that seemed true too to the keen eye, like not wearing anything with personality or, God forbid, words out and about. You don't wear shirts with words out and about. I mean, it just seemed like nobody did that. As the ball game headed into extra innings, I asked if the others like me were ready to go. We all were. We left and rode home in mostly silence. I miss Japan. I promised to return, but I'm also savoring not worrying about this, that, and the other when I'm out and about. I mentioned earlier what Japan does better than us, but I came home and saw that we've got nachos down pat. I'd been served a version of nachos at Disney's Tokyo Sea theme park that were bugles with liquid cheese on top. It was so weird. Americans, we know how to do nachos well. All Mexican food, for that matter, and popcorn. God, we do popcorn well. It's an awkward dance in America of cultures, backgrounds, you name it. We are indeed the great big melting pot, and I've never appreciated that more than in the days after we landed in the U.S. We have massive diversity of mind, body, and soul. It is beautiful, and it's what leads us to leading the world in innovation. All these different points of view coalesce into bright new ideas. Yes, it's more work to count everybody in, to listen to voices loud and quiet, but the fruits of those efforts are what live at the core of the United States. We can share our thoughts, our opinions, and listen to those of others. We can talk openly about racism and sexism and all the damn isms, as well as speak straight about mental health and suicide and domestic abuse, you name it, and we're able to have conversations about it, which I'll never take for granted again, at least this week. I miss Japan. I love the people so much. They are eager and willing to help if you can't find your way to a train or 7-Eleven, but I love the people of the U.S. too. Traveling's ultimate souvenir is to give us that wide lens viewpoint, but then a crisp new take on our old, tired, habitual ways. Thank you for listening to this episode of Curious Cat. This episode is brought to you in memorial for my beloved uncle, Patrick Prudhomme, and his lifelong partner, Linda, sending them love and sending Patrick on to wonderful adventures in the beyond. Until next week, stay curious. I love you.
Hey, you. Yes, you. Are you looking for a new podcast that appeals to your scientific curiosity, but is also a little bit spooky?
Show me how I died in a past life.
Well, look no further, because this cat is where it's at.
He had concerns about the ethics surrounding AI, feeling they had achieved consciousness.
Curious Cat Podcast examines the shadowy space where science and the supernatural collide. Listen every week with your host, Jennifer Holtz, as she and her guests explore what it means to be a soul in a meat suit.
We were healing karma together. They were all kind of predestined to resolve something.
Listen on all your favorite streaming apps and continue the conversation on Twitter at CuriousCatPodCA, or find Jennifer and all her links at Jennifer L. Holtz, spelled HOTES.com.